Into it today. We're going to get right into it. I cut myself shaving here. Forgive me. So, there is a question that I was asked today, and I wanted to get right into that question. And so I'll give it a couple minutes, just a couple quick minutes here to populate, and then we're going to jump right into it. I'm not sure who's here in the room yet, but we're going to need a couple of people. Hello, Tiff. How are you? Nice to see you. So nice to see you. So the question that I posed a moment ago, and I put on the title of this live was, are laws racist? Are laws classist? Is it both? Why? When? How come? And to me, the most important question of all the things I just said is the why. How come? Why? 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 Why in the world would we have a system? I cut myself shaving, forgive me. Why would we have a system that would be based on race? And why would we have a system that's based on class? So good evening, everybody. Thank you guys for coming. How many times have you guys been here? Is it your first time here? Is it your second time here? How many times have you guys been here? How many times have you been to this particular channel? How many times have you stopped by this live? Can you just type it right here real quick, just so I understand, a little basic understanding? Let me see if I can wipe this lens off, because I did work out today for the first time in a few days. So how many times? First time? Tiffany first. Third time, you think? Okay, cool. Just gonna, yeah, there was a little smudge on the camera. That's why it was a little bit shady. Again, first Vancouver. Where are you guys at? So Vancouver's 12 times, only love. Thank you so much for coming so many times. I do appreciate that. Everybody appreciates it when they tune into their live. And so, can anybody answer the question? I mean, can anybody just go ahead and answer that question for me? Are laws racist? Can someone, because not everything is racist. And if you're not sure and you don't know about me and it's your first time here, I'm currently being persecuted by a group of, a group largely consisted of black people. I'm currently being persecuted by a group of black people, and it's absolutely racist what's happening to me right now, or what has happened to me, and I move forward, I push forward. T-Roy's in the room. Thanks for coming, T-Roy. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate the nice compliment. So can anybody tell me, are laws racist or are laws classist? I had a conversation with an 18-year-old young man earlier tonight who is a student. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Hello from PA. How you guys doing? I did cut myself shaving, so I'm going to try to get right into this as soon as I quickly can. You guys hit your like button. So now, who thinks laws are racist? I'm just going to take a real quick poll, and then I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to jump right into this lecture because I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit fired up. Last night I was a little bit off. I've never considered our modern laws racist. So then let me ask you a question. I appreciate you saying that. Is Terry v. Ohio a modern law? Terry v. Ohio, as you know, is the focus of my entire thing, Terry versus Ohio. My t-shirt says overturn Terry. I used to sell these on my merch store. I no longer do because I'm not a good t-shirt shipper. But can anybody tell me? So is Terry versus Ohio 1968, is that a modern law or is that a law from the past? Can anybody let me know that? Is Terry v. Ohio a modern law or is that a law from yesteryear? Anybody? How do you like... It's okay, it still exists. So, but is it a modern law? Is it a modern law? So you think Terry v. Ohio is from the past, Vincent? You think Terry v. Ohio is from the past? Who thinks Terry versus Ohio is from the past? Go ahead and just chime in. Listen, and there's no wrong answer here. I'm not gonna, unless you give incorrect data here and not a question, unless you say something incorrect, I'm not gonna come at you for your point of view. Okay? You stay on your boat. So Terry versus Ohio is the most liberty-stripping, unlegislated policy created by judicial activism from the Supreme Court that we face today. Terry versus Ohio is what creates, and you see where the stick is, the yardstick, and there's the modern day penal system. It is 100% based on Terry versus Ohio, and Terry versus Ohio is based on race. Terry versus Ohio is based on race. Now, I don't want that to be true. The color of my skin is pale, even though I am Colombian. I'm currently being persecuted by a majority group of black people who are being racist towards me because they don't want me to lead on constitutional liberties, even though I'm going to do it anyway. Okay? I'm going to do it anyway. I'm a constitutional law scholar. I'm not going to stop because you don't like what I'm saying, especially when the people who are cutting me down are ignorant. They don't know the laws. They don't understand the laws. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. And there's the closest thing to a curse word I've used today, and I'll try not to repeat that word again. Forgive me, parents who are showing this to their children. So now we have 25 people in the room. You guys hit your like button real quick. Drop in the comments where you're watching from. And now we're going to delve into all of the laws. 25 people in the room is enough people for me to begin. And so let's take a poll. Of the 25 people right here, let's take a poll. How many people think laws are racist? Just put, I think they're racist. Just write it right here. I think they're racist. How many people think laws are classist? Just put, I think they're classist. Just type it right here, and I'm going to count them off as we go. Okay, I'm going to count them off as we go. Soldotna, Alaska. What's up, AK lady? I'm from Soldotna, Alaska. Okay, so I have a classist. I have a classist. There's two classists. Who thinks they're, okay, Oklahoma. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Racist. So I got one racist there. I got a classist. I've got a class and racist by Tiffany. Very good answer, Tiffany. Do you think they're both? I think they're racist, so we're pretty split here. Classist, now there's one above for classist, both. Classist, now they're even again, even in the room. Terry versus Ohio, Vice Lord Ford, that's true. Indiana, racist, now racist is up by one. Racist is up by one. Who thinks they're racist or classist? That's only 10, 12 people so far. Both, okay, I've got 3 or 4 boths now. I know we're on the same. I went, nice. Racist, now racist is up by one. So anybody else? And then we're going to jump right into a classist. Paul says classist. AK lady says both. Okay, cool. Cops protect property, not people. That's correct. Thank you for that. Laws are monetary, passed by race. They got passed by race, and they greatly affect. Okay, so, okay, both. Okay, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys chiming in. Now, let's get into the lecture at hand. Let me just get my last little shaving cut here, and then I'll stop worrying about my vanity, and I will just dig right into this lecture. Okay, so now typically what I do is I work backwards from the beginning of history, and we go to John Locke's theory of natural law. He's the first man who coined all men are created equally. You understand that, right? John Locke's Lockean law is not racist. Nothing makes me more upset than someone saying that John Locke's natural law is racist. This is the reason why Kyle Rittenhouse was not guilty of murder. And if you don't know that, now you know. I got a video on here that's titled Natural Law is Not Racist. So I want you guys to take a look at that. And instead of going from backward to forward, we're going to move to the front of the timeline here today. We're going to start at the front of the timeline. Let me get the lighting a little bit because I'm typically in the back of the room. So let me come here. So now, we're going to start with the 2010 holding. We're going to start with the 2010 holding. It's going to be on this map over here. We are going to start with the 2010 holding right here. Boom, 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 boom. The 2010 holding of Federal Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. If T-Roy, if you want to pull that up, it's the Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission from 2010. I don't see it on the poster here. I thought it was on here, but I don't see it on there. So the 2010 holding of Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission is what made corporations people. Is anybody not familiar with the 2010 case of Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission? Has anybody ever not heard of that case? T-Roy, if you want to throw a link up there, it's on oyez.org, oyez.org, and that's going to be Federal Election Commission versus Citizens United. Good to see you, Justice. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming by, my brother. So now, when you talk about the 2010 holding of Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, that's what gave corporations the same right as individual people to be able to dump as much money as they wanted into the election process. And the question I have for you is, how many citizens were united, commoners like you and I, who was united on the idea that we would have a group of citizens united that would empower corporations to pour all the money they want into our federal elections? That is a classist decision in 2010. If anybody wants to drop the link up there, feel free to drop that link of Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. How many people here, and just give me a little chime back here, how many people are united, Citizens United, that want corporations to dump all money into federal elections? Anybody? Anybody? Is anybody here for that? Is anybody pro that the corporations, Citizens is an employee of the corporation? Okay, Mike, listen, don't get too advanced here. Let's just stay with the very basics. So let me ask you guys a question. Just vote right here. How many people think it's a good thing that corporations can dump all the money they want into elections? Okay, that is a classist decision. It is classist. Because if you don't own a multi-billion-dollar corporation, it doesn't affect you one bit. I don't care if you're a small business owner and you give the maximum contribution of $3,400 a month to your specific elected official. So now, right here, no. So many people are no. And you know why? Because it's a classist decision. And who made that classist decision? It's going to be the Roberts Court. The Roberts Court, 2005 until currently. So how come the Roberts Court would pass that? Because Roberts is historian. Did you know that? John Roberts, I believe I'm not going to guess. I don't want to be wrong. But I want to know the answer, so it's going to bug me. But he's the last appointed Supreme Court justice who had to go through a confirmation, and he's going to be confirmed by George W. Bush's Senate, which is going to then create a classist system because there are no Citizens United who wanted to give corporations all the power in the world to dump all of their money into federal elections. That is not true. It is a classist decision passed by the Roberts Court in 2010. Did anybody dump the link on there for me? Dump the link on there from Oyez, oyez.org, oyez.org. Please, someone take a look at that link. It's Citizens United versus FEC. It's not federal. You might call it Federal Election Commission. So now there is the most recent holding that I can easily point out. Well, you're also going to have the 2014 decision. I don't know if all the cases are on the wall. You're also going to have the 2014 decision called Shelby County versus Holder. And that's going to be a 2014 holding that when Shelby County, Alabama, they sued Eric Holder, who was the Secretary of State for Obama. I think he was the head of the Justice Department, Eric Holder. Anybody want to type that in there for me? So Eric Holder, who was the attorney, was he the Attorney General? I can't quite remember. I can't get all these people in my head perfectly. So I'm a flawed person, okay? I am what I am. So now the 2014 case of Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder, what is that going to overturn? That's going to overturn that's going to overturn the 1965 Civil Rights Act on voting. Do you follow what I'm saying to you? So the 2014 case of Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder is going to be based on race. And that was in 2014. If anybody wants to look that up, no, it wasn't John Ashcroft. I'm sorry. That was the Attorney General for George W. Bush. So now Eric Holder was the Attorney General for Obama, I believe. Because when you sue the administration, for example, if I sue the current administration, the Biden administration, I have to list someone in his executive cabinet. That's how you sue the current administration. So currently Ron DeSantis is suing the Biden administration. I'm not sure who the case is levied against, but it has to be someone in his executive cabinet. Okay, that's how it works. That's why Shelby County, Alabama is a racist holding. And why is it a racist holding? Because it upends the 1965 Civil Rights Act. And what did the 1965 Civil Rights Act specifically say? It said that they would have voting monitors in the states where they withheld the voting rights of people of color, or they tried to stop the Voting Rights Act. And so now what's the big argument going on right now based on Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder? And so what has happened with the state of Alabama after the racist decision, there's no other way to see it. Now Alabama has put in barriers to voting that include you can't have water in line. You can't have someone hold your place. You can't hold an umbrella. And then they shrunk the amount of voting facilities. And so now you have less people of color who are going to vote in Alabama. Whether I like it or not, my skin is pale. Black people are persecuting me right now. And I still can recognize that Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder in 2014 is a racist holding. Whether I like it or not. It doesn't make me happy to say it. My skin's pale. Soy colombiano, pero it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's a racist holding. If you didn't know it, now you know. Welcome to reality. So now you can't have water in line. You can't have someone hold an umbrella. And these are just a couple of things I know off the top of my head. However, when we really delve back into history and we talk about what is racist and what is classist, we're going to have a split here. You're going to have a split. Some decisions are going to be racist and some are going to be classist. So we went from 2010 to 2014. And then as we step back here, now Terry versus Ohio, the reason we have to go to Terry before we spawn into the rest of the stare decisis that are based on the jurisprudence that are based off Terry, we first have to understand that the most liberty stripping, unlegislated, judicial activism, unconstitutional policies of Terry versus Ohio are 100% based on race. Now, I don't want that to be true. It doesn't make me happy to say it, but we have to face the facts. John Terry was persecuted for simply being downtown Cleveland in 1963. And this is what some of my conservative friends on the right are going to have to face. You're going to have to face this, that the same laws that persecute you and me today, because now that my skin is pale and my hair slightly grows gray, the police, if you can see from my last audit, the police don't even want to engage with me because my skin is pale and I know a lot about the Constitution. They don't even want to mess around. They want to get the hell away from me as quickly as they can. And I had a lot of comments on that last audit that said that if that constitutional professor was black, it wouldn't have gone the same way. And let me just tell you something real quick. I strongly disagree. I strongly disagree with that. And the reason why is because when you have the knowledge, you have the power. And so that's what the reason why I come on these lives and I sit and I educate for so long, because I'm trying to empower you. Just like when I was reaching out to that Talib the Dweeb, the rapper, just like when I reached out to that dweeb and he called me a racist, I was trying to empower him. Because whether he likes it or not, he doesn't have any power. He doesn't have any power. Whether he likes it or not. He may think he does not. Because throughout the history of time, as you well might know, Black lives have not mattered when it comes down to legislation and policy and the law, whether I like that or not, okay? Whether I like it or not. And these are things I don't enjoy saying right now because I'm pretty upset in general at a large portion of people within the Black community because the hundreds of thousands of followers that I had, very, very few came to my aid when people called me a racist. Tiffany did. Tiffany in the room, she did, and a few other people did. I know who they are, and I'm grateful for that. So now let's go back to the beginning of time here. Let's go back. Let's step back, and let's get it off black versus white. Let's get it into the foundation of our country. Was the foundation of our country based on racism or classism? Go ahead. Anybody? Anybody? Does anybody know if and in particular, I'm going to zoom in here to a case called Johnson versus McIntosh. Now, this has nothing to do with Black people. This has to do with Native American people. Does anybody know about the case of Johnson versus McIntosh? Does anybody know? Harry Anslinger's decisions were based on money, on capitalism. It was not based on racism. Now, he was very happy to arrest as many Black people as he could because he was actually, from what I've learned about him, he was more racist against Mexicans, but he persecuted Black people extensively. I saw the comments about Harry Anslinger. But does anybody know about McIntosh versus Johnson? Does anybody know about this holding right here? If anybody knows about it, can you guys please type down in here, yes, I know about McIntosh versus Johnson, or no, I do not know about McIntosh versus Johnson. Because we're going to have to step back from McIntosh versus Johnson. We're going to have to go back to the 1455 palpable, which goes back to the 1444 holding by Pope Nicholas Alexander the ninth, because Pope, and then his son is gonna go just by Pope Nicholas the 10th. And so that's going to go back. So now what Johnson versus McIntosh is about, Johnson and McIntosh are two white guys. And everything in our country, whether we like it or not, we are a racially polarized country. The people who are persecuting me are upset that I have green eyes and pale skin, even though I'm a Latino. They're upset that I'm centering myself in civil liberties. And they were jealous that I was the #1 TikTok channel for lives. And so when you get to Johnson versus McIntosh, what you're talking about is Johnson and McIntosh are both selling land, but they're selling land. One is selling land to Native American. One of them is selling land that they had bought from a Native American, and the other is selling land that they had bought or got from the federal government. So Johnson versus McIntosh goes back to the 1455 palpable, which says that any Northern European, any European who discovers land is called the doctrine of discovery. Is anybody familiar with the doctrine of discovery? Is anybody familiar of the doctrine of discovery? Has anybody heard of the doctrine of discovery? Is it your first time hearing this? Just let me know here, because I go back and I read the comments on live because I want to make sure I'm not talking above or below or insulting anybody, because I do care about how you feel, but facts don't care about your feelings. I care about how you feel, but the facts of history don't give two cruds how you feel. And I hear this all the time. My friend Hunter, earlier we were texting back and forth. This is the 18-year-old young man. And he said to me, I don't think this. And I said, Hunter, I don't want to offend you, but you think and I know. There's a big difference between us in this fact, right? So never heard of the doctrine of discovery. If you guys have not heard of the doctrine of discovery, I highly recommend that you pop it into Google. And then, by the way, it's quite a nice little rabbit hole that you go down when you learn about Pope Nicholas X, Pope Alexander Nicholas IX, and you find out that the doctrine of discovery is based on the ideology that if you are a European, what do they call them? European discover, what do they call them? A European, what do they call those people who are, they're seeking out new lands? Palpal, is that right? Oliver, am I saying it incorrectly? If I'm saying it incorrectly, please correct me, because I don't want to be wrong. And I am wrong sometimes, so I love being corrected. It is my favorite thing in the world when I get a DM or an email and you tell me that I was wrong. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Dr. Sean. So now right here, Johnson versus McIntosh, and this is where if it's 1823, then it's going to be John Marshall. So if you guys really want to have a good time and you really want to get into some super interesting the holding, just so you know, John Marshall, it's one of the longest written holdings in Supreme Court history. John Marshall writes this long holding in Johnson versus McIntosh where he validates and verifies and what's the word I'm looking for? Where he excuses the reason why Native Americans cannot sell their own land. That's what Johnson versus McIntosh is about. Now, we can go back in time and we can easily understand that throughout the history of time, it's been about conquering new lands, it's been about imperialism, and you can make all the excuses that you want. However, the Native Americans didn't have a right to sell their land anymore after Johnson versus McIntosh. If you wanted to buy land in the United States, you had to buy land from the federal government or from the state government. So is Johnson versus McIntosh, is it racist? Is it racist? Anybody? I mean, I want to know what you think, because it matters to me what you think. And then now that I've given you guys the crumbs of where to begin your research, I want you to find out. I want you to dig in. The more educated our society is, the better we're going to be. The more we can take down these horrific laws that are based on race. Johnson versus McIntosh, it's based on American imperialism, which could also be considered based on race. And so it just depends on how you want to see it. Do you want to see it as it is, Now, if you go back to the doctrine of discovery that Johnson versus McIntosh is based upon, then you're going to look back and you're going to say, well, it wasn't necessarily based on race. If you actually read, and the doctrine of discovery, by the way, is only 3 paragraphs. It's not like it's a hard, complicated read here. I'm not sending you on some gigantic voyage here where you're going to have to do the same amount of research that I've done to get to this point. I'm saying that you can very easily look up the doctrine of discovery, and it doesn't require massive amounts of reading here. The doctrine of discovery is 3 paragraphs. I think it's 2. I think it's 2 paragraphs. No, that's not why the FBI was created at all, David. That's incorrect data. David, that's incorrect data. That's not why the FBI was created. The FBI was created after World War I and the exact specific reason that the FBI was created, according to the government, was to take on anything anti-American. And then it was also created because police were so heavily involved in prohibition, and you can get that from the Wickersham Commission. It's in the Wickersham Commission why the FBI was created. Now, you're going to have to really dig and look, but you can find it. The FBI was created specifically to take on anything un-American, or, what's the word I'm looking for? Starts with a C. Communism. Because, and I don't want to get too distracted here. I want to go up the line here of different laws. But the FBI was specifically created to take on anything anti-American, including the word C that starts with communism. Okay? So now, right, capitalism, Mike, capitalism. So now look, I am a capitalist. I believe in capitalism. I am against communism. I am against socialism. Let me be clear. Does capitalism need to be tweaked a little bit? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. We have to figure out the tweaks in capitalism that will take it away from elitists, where they get all the money at the top and the rest of us get crumbs. Okay? Okay? Explain how Panthers were destroyed, but KKK exists. Just like to hear your perspective. So... yeah, you know that's not a 2-second answer. You know that. You know that's not, I can't just answer that off the top. Like, oh, you know, the KKK still exists. But that's such a loaded question. And remember, I only talk about facts on this page. I only say things that are factual, and you can fact check me. And like I said a minute ago, I absolutely love it when someone fact checks me and tells me that you were incorrect. It's my favorite thing in the world to find out that I was incorrect, because then I'm not wrong anymore, and I just don't want to be wrong. Okay, so now, how do you see it? How do you guys see it? Do you guys see Johnson versus McIntosh is based on capitalism, or do you see Johnson versus McIntosh based on racism, or do you see Johnson versus McIntosh based on American imperialism? Who sees it? Who sees it? How do you see it? I want to know how you guys see it. I really want to understand exactly how you guys see it. I want to know what you think. Good to see you, M-Star Media. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. How do you guys see Johnson versus McIntosh? Now, I gave you a little bit of the case study, just a tiny bit, and you really only need to know this much. Native American Indians were no longer allowed to sell their land, and you had to buy land either from the state government, from the federal government, or an individual white person who had acquired that land from the federal or state government. That's Johnson versus McIntosh in a tiny little nutshell. But when you read John, which by the way, if you look up John Marshall's decision or opinion or holding in Johnson versus McIntosh, it is pages. It is pages. And it's quite a research project to get it. Let me see if I have it on my computer. If anybody wants it, I'll send it over to you guys. So, okay, so the abolishment of real property, right? Okay. Hey, Cultural Contrarian, how you doing, brother? Good to see you, man. I really appreciate the phone call we had the other day. I really learned a lot from you, and I appreciate what you taught me. So now let's continue on down the line. So Johnson versus, now let's go to Dred Scott. Remember, our entire system is based on John Locke's theory of natural law, that all men are created equal, that we're all entitled to life, liberty, and I'm sorry, am I talking above your head, man? I'm trying not to. I'm trying to really keep this basic. So our entire Bill of Rights and our Constitution is based on Lockean theory, which says that all men are created equal, and that we have 3 basic tenets: life, liberty, and property. And so now the 1857 holding of Dred Scott, is that going to be based on race? Dred Scott, does anybody not know what the Dred Scott holding is about? Does anybody not know what Dred Scott is about? Does anybody not know? Because if you don't know, then you absolutely, if you don't know the Dred Scott case, then my friends, this is something that you absolutely have to know. You have to know it. You have to understand it. Because the Dred Scott case is the whole reason why we had a civil war. It's the whole reason. So Angel, Dred Scott, the Dred Scott versus Sanford is when a slave, you have to say it what it is, when a slave from the South, when his owner dies, the widow takes him from the South up to the North. I believe it's Chicago. And so Dred Scott gets up to the North above the 50-50 line. Remember, in 1850, you have the Fugitive Slave Act, that if a black person who is in slavery escapes to the North where there's freedom, that the Northerners have to bring the slave back down and he will remain in slavery. And this is a huge tension for Northerners and Southerners, for Confederates versus freedom fighters, because anybody who was fighting for slavery, in my opinion, was an absolute brainwashed person. Because I don't even want to get into this disgust of slavery, but the Dred Scott holding is where Dred Scott, when he gets up to Chicago, he then sues the widow of his owner, and the brother-in-law sues him. Sanford sues Dred Scott and says, no, you're a slave. So the Dred Scott holding, what happens in 1857 is it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, Dred Scott is not a man, he's property. You can't even be here suing, you're property, brother. What are you doing here? And so what happens in the Dred Scott holding is the Supreme Court, the Supreme Tyranny, they say that Dred Scott is not a man, he's property. And that's going to be the Roger Taney Court. Taft kept going in my head. The Roger Taney Court is going to say that. And so this holding right here, the Dred Scott holding, for 2 years, it drives John Brown absolutely crazy. And then in November of 1859, he's going to attack Harper's Ferry and try to take on General Lee's army, which is him, his son, and a few other people, and they're going to get wiped out, and John Brown's going to be hung. And so this is the Dred Scott holding of 1857. This sets up our entire culture that we live in today. He's property. And this causes the Civil War. So is the Dred Scott holding based on race, or is it based on classism? You could make the argument that it's based on classism. It's a far stretch, because what you're talking about here is you're talking about, if you were a Southerner in 1856, 1855, you couldn't really... Fine, I'm gone. Why are you leaving, Mike? I don't understand. Are you having a fight with someone in the comments? Listen, don't let a fight with someone in the comments have you run off, dude. Listen, you're allowed to have a perspective. If you guys want to battle back and forth between each other, you're welcome to do it. But don't shut yourself off from the knowledge just because you're offended by someone in the comment section. And by the way, when we talk about race and we talk about classism, there's going to be a fair amount of consternation, of anxiety. That's consternation means anxiety. So Mike, don't let it get to you, man. Don't let it get to you. When we talk about race and we talk about classism and we talk about freedom and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, if it doesn't affect you, you don't give a crud. You don't care. And so because you're so passionate right now, Mike, you actually care. And it's, by the way, a lot of people on the right now follow this channel. And so it's hard to hear these things, because today, in today's world, everything's racist, and it's not. It's simply not. So let me stay focused on the laws at hand here. So the Dred Scott holding is going to be based on race 100%, and then Cruikshank versus the United States. This is, now does anybody know the actual basis of Cruikshank? Does anybody know the actual basis of the Cruikshank holding and what the Supreme Court is going to hold in the Cruikshank case? The Supreme Court is going to hold. And when I say hold, what I'm talking, thank you, I appreciate it. Hey, I'll see you tomorrow, accountability for all. So what is the Cruikshank case going to hold? What's the actual holding? And so when you talk about the 1876 Cruikshank case, that's going to be the P. Chase Court. What was his first name again? Okay, so this is I'm sorry about that. It's going to be the Waite Court, not the, I can't even get my years straight tonight. So it's going to be the 1876 holding with the Waite Court. And what's the Cruikshank holding going to say? What is the exact holding of Cruikshank? Well, the holding of Cruikshank, which sets off the lynching chart in America, it's going to say that the Supreme Court, that the federal government cannot ensure your rights. That we can't ensure your first 10 amendments. And so what is that going to be? What is that going to be based off of? Does anybody know what the Cruikshank case is based off of? I'll wait. Does anybody know what the Cruikshank case is based off of? Does anybody know what the Cruikshank case is based off of? Does anybody know the actual holding of why the Cruikshank case happened? Does anybody know why? I'm just waiting to see if anybody knows the actual understanding of Cruikshank so that you can kind of understand where it comes from. What in the world happened in Cruikshank, and why does it matter? And Cruikshank, just so you know, was the name of one of the individuals within the case. His name was Cruikshank. That was his actual name. And by the way, if you look up the definition of, I'm not going to tell you, look up the definition of Cruikshank, and it's going to blow your mind. So the 1876 Cruikshank case is based off of the 1873 Colfax Massacre. Okay, and what's the 1873 Colfax Massacre based off of? The 1873 Colfax Massacre is based off the 1872 elections in Louisiana. And what happens is you're going to have a split ballot where both a Republican and a Democrat claims to be the winner of the Louisiana governor's race. And so for almost a year, Louisiana is governed by both a Republican Party and a Democrat Party. Now, the Republican Party takes the governor's mansion because they feel as though they've won. And back in 1872 in Louisiana, if you were a Republican, then you supported black liberation. And if you were a Democrat, then there was a very good chance that you did not support black liberation. And so in 1873, it festers for several months. And then in 1873, you have the Colfax Massacre, and this is where the Democrat-led government is going to attack the Republican-held governor's mansion, and they're going to massacre 150 people. Now, those are both black and white people, but the majority are black. And so when you get to the Cruikshank holding, where the federal government is going to hear the case of the Colfax Massacre, they're going to hold that the Cruikshank Massacre, they don't even try those people, just so you know. This is the most funny part. It's not funny, but this is the most ironic part of it, is that they hold that these people had violated the 1870 Enforcement Act. And there were two different enforcement acts. Liberal here, I wouldn't identify myself as a liberal, but I'm glad you're here, man. Thanks for coming by. And so the 1870 Colfax Massacre is going to be based on the 1873 is going to be based on the 1870 Enforcement Act being violated. And so the Cruikshank holding that these members of the KKK, they did not violate the 1870 Enforcement Act, and they get off. They don't get found guilty of violating the 1870 Enforcement Act. So is Cruikshank based on class or based on race? Anybody? So look, so this is the part. So this is the part. Just so you know, this is the part where the people on TikTok, the application I just left, and I'm spending most of my time on YouTube now. This is the part where they talk about having uncomfortable conversations. And so for me personally, as an individual, as a person, my politics have gone far right. I'm voting right now. I want Ron DeSantis to run for president. I would like Tulsi Gabbard to be his running mate. My politics have gone all the way to the right now because I think the left has lost their mind. That's how I feel. Joe Biden can't even understand that when they say, let's go Brandon, they're talking about him being a tool, and he repeats, let's go Brandon. So my politics have gone hard right. I will be voting in people on the right, and I haven't voted for a Republican since before 2008. I'm just saying. So this is the part where some of the people on TikTok who said you have to have hard conversations, this is one of those hard conversations with my conservative friends on the right. That we have to understand that a lot of the basis of law, which is all I teach the unedited history of the United States of America. I don't teach an edited version. I don't teach a Bolshevik version. You see that? I caught myself. And just so you guys know, if you guys don't know about the Bolshevik communist revolution, Bolshevik, you guys should look up the Bolshevik communist revolution. It completely... Oh, Mike, you saying goodbye again? Mike's saying goodbye again? I hate to see you go, Mike. I really enjoy it. I got your email, by the way. I took a look at I took a look at your email. Thanks for sending that today, by the way. I appreciate that. It always gives me new stuff to look at when you send me something, and I really appreciate that. So now, yeah, I'm not going to curse. So now we go through, and Plessy versus Ferguson, we know that this creates racial segregation. But then right through the Lochner era of courts, of the Supreme Court is where we're going to have some hard. Hey, T. Roy has a coupon for you, Only Love. If you want a coupon, T. Roy, who's the moderator here, he's got coupons for $5 off posters. So anyway, so here's the thing. So now right through here, you're going to have a series of holdings, and let's take a look at the 1927 holding of Lum versus Rice. Lum versus Rice is where Martha Lum is in Bolivar County, Mississippi. And in 1927, that's going to be a Taft court. That's going to be William Howard Taft. He's going to be the head of the Supreme Court, and that's going to be right here, the Taft court, 1921 to 1930. 1921 to 1930. And so when we get to Lum versus Rice, this case is going to be based on Martha Lum. Now, I'm not sure if she was Chinese. Does anybody know if Lum is a Chinese last name? I think is Lum Chinese? Is that what it is? Does anybody know the answer to that? Does anybody know the origins of the last name of Lum? Does anybody know what that is? Anybody? Anybody? Does anybody know that? Does anybody know the last name Lum? Is that a Chinese last name? Because Martha Lum is in Bolivar County, Mississippi, and she wants to go to school. Good to see you, Brooklyn. So she wants to go to school in Bolivar County, Mississippi, and her case goes to the Supreme Court, and this is going to be tied to the Plessy versus it's Japanese. Thank you, Tiffany. So Martha Lum is Japanese, and she wants to go to school in Bolivar County, Mississippi, and the holding is that and Howard Taft actually wrote the holding that was quoted in the newspapers, and it says that if Martha Lum wants to go to school in Bolivar County, Mississippi, then she can find a colored school to go to in Bolivar County, Mississippi. Now, whether I like that or not, that's based on race. That's based on race. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump ahead of of Reconstruction, which, by the way, Reconstruction officially ends in the 1876 election of Rutherford B. Hayes. And that is on the poster here. Boom, 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 right here, 1877. So Rutherford B. Hayes is going to be installed in president, the 1876 election, and then in 1877, when Rutherford B. Hayes is installed as president, then what he does is he officially ends Reconstruction by pulling the northern troops out of the South, which then allows this new organization called the KKK to flourish. And so that's what's going to happen. Chinese. Okay, so it's not, see, I thought it was Chinese. Okay, so now right here. So now let's move forward here. Let's get past the overt racist stuff, because we know this is racist. And now let's talk about the holdings that affect you and I today the most, which is going to be Terry, which we already went over a little bit, that Terry is 100% based on race. We know that to be sure, because we know that, and anybody here, anybody first timers here, any second timers here, because maybe you haven't heard it. We know that Lyndon Johnson right here, he's going to collude with Earl Warren, and the two of them are going to try to create Terry versus Ohio, which is the policy that makes officer safety over the top of your civil liberties. Seventh timer, thank you, Oliver. I appreciate you coming. So we know this is going to be based on race because John Terry's downtown Cleveland, and then Martin McFadden grabbing him. So we know that the Terry holding is going to be based on race. But then after Terry, are you going to have more holdings? Because remember, we have Brown versus Board of Education, Corrigan versus Buckley, 1926, I believe. Corrigan versus Buckley is 1926, and that's going to the 1926 holding of Corrigan versus Buckley is why is a large reason why a lot of the black communities don't have home ownership today. And so now we know these laws are racist, but then we get to Terry, and that's going to be the last kind of overtly, openly racist holding. And then after that, the Supreme Court holdings that are jurisprudence after Terry, are they going to be based on race, or are they going to be based on classism? And this is the conversation I had with Hunter on text message earlier tonight. And so I was just asking this hard question, is it based on race or is it based on classism? And so my conservative friends, we're going to have to get together and understand, because listen, let's take a step back. Let's take a step back just one more time, because you're going to have the 1911 holding of the Sullivan Act. And so if anybody here is a Second Amendment proponent like I am, I'm all for the Second Amendment. I know for a fact that the 1911 Sullivan Act is 100. Does anybody here have the PDFs that I send out all the time about gun control? Does anybody have the PDFs about gun control? So the 1911 Sullivan Act is going to be the first big step in stripping Americans of their gun rights. I'm not sure if you know that or not. Does anybody not know about the 1911 Sullivan Act? Because if you don't, we need to talk about it a little bit. Angel, is this your first time here, brother? I appreciate you coming. And so now what we're talking about when we talk about the 1911 Sullivan Act, what we're talking about specifically, the Bacon Rebellion, we can get into that too if you want to, Maddox, is that Maddox Thorn. So now the 1911 Sullivan Act, this is going to be 100% based on anybody? Can anybody tell me? It's based on race. It's based on race. Whether I like it or not. Right. And so okay, so Dr. Sean Berry just said it. He said the most fundamental right we have, Kyle Rittenhouse had the right, number one, Lockean law, the right to defend his own life. And Kyle Rittenhouse had a right to carry that gun. He had a right to be there to defend private property. Whether anybody likes it or not, Kyle Rittenhouse had every right to be there to defend property, to defend his life, to self-protection. And I give a long lecture on Kyle Rittenhouse, and he had every single right to do what he did. And if you watch the end of that trial, they are attacking Kyle Rittenhouse tooth and nail, jump kicking him, throwing blocks at him, trying to attack him. And let me just tell you something. Kyle Rittenhouse showed a lot more restraint than I would have, because when he pointed the gun at the second person, the guy put his hands up. I don't know if I would have done that. After I got jump kicked in the face, I don't know if I would have done that, to be honest. Because once I'm attacked, I'm ready to fight. And so now what's going to happen is the Lockean law that our country is based upon with John Locke's theory of natural law, he had the right to defend his life. He had the right to defend the private property in Wisconsin. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand the basic canons of our government. And if you don't understand what the canons are, there's 9 different canons that set up our government. And this is another conversation. We can get into that. But the first infringement, the very first infringement of our gun rights is based on the 1911 Sullivan Act. Now, you guys are welcome to disagree about Kyle Rittenhouse, but let me just tell you, it's wrong to be wrong. It's always wrong to be wrong. And if you don't think Kyle Rittenhouse had the right to defend his life, then let me just help you out. You're incorrect. The data is incorrect. Like I say to people all the time, if your data is incorrect, I will correct you. And then, by the way, like I've said 50 times during this cast, if I'm incorrect, correct me, because I don't want to be wrong. I do not want to teach the wrong thing. I really don't, because being wrong is always wrong. And you are doing a disservice to everybody who's around when you're wrong. So the first way that our government infringes on our gun rights is from the 1911 Sullivan Act. And that's going to be from Governor Tim Sullivan passing an executive order that's then going to go through the New York Congress, and they're going to vote for this act called the Sullivan Act based on Tim Sullivan. And what is the act based on? Anybody? Is the Sullivan Act that strips away our Second Amendment right and gives it to the police? That's called a convergence of power. Can someone type that down there for me? Convergence of power. Type that down there for me, pretty please, so that other people, when I read this super chat later, is it called super chat or is it called live chat? I can't remember. Anyway, I've been researching YouTube, so I'm getting a lot of information. So it's called a convergence of power. Has anybody ever heard of that term before? Has anybody ever heard of that term? Has anybody ever heard of the term convergence of power? Thank you, Dr. Sean. Has anybody heard of that term before? Anybody? Thank you, T. Roy. T. Roy does have coupons. So a convergence of power, what that means is that the power that you have, your rights, are then given to another party in the constitutional terms here. And so the 1911 Sullivan Act, that's a convergence of power where your Second Amendment was given to the president of the police bureau, where you had to get your gun rights. If you wanted to carry a gun after 1911 in New York City, you had to get your rights from the president of the police bureau. Who think that's constitutional? Anybody? Does anybody think that's constitutional? I just want to know what you guys think. Do you think that I should have to get my gun rights from the president of the police bureau, that I should have to put in an application? Does anybody think that I should have to put in an application for me to carry a gun? And just in case you guys don't know, we always revert back to ourselves. And so just last month in October, when I was branded a racist by the racists within the Black Lives Matter movement, they are outright racist. When I was branded a racist, I wanted to carry a gun. And in some states, I had to look up to make sure that I wouldn't go to jail for carrying a gun. And that's based on the 1911 Sullivan Act. That is based on the 1911 Sullivan Act. And the 1911 Sullivan Act, in case you didn't know, is 100% based on race. I send out a PDF. I have 2 different PDFs. If you don't have them, please get them from me. One is called, they're both called The Racist Origins of Gun Control. One is by Clayton E. Kramer, and the other is by Steve Eckwall. I send them out. They're totally free. I'll send them to you totally for free. You guys can contact T. Roy as well. He's more than welcome to also disseminate these. And Clayton E. Kramer and Steve Eckwall both give written permission to share their PDFs, which I openly share, as long as we don't change, redact, or alter the PDF, and I don't. So you should definitely read them so that you have a comprehension of how we lost our gun rights. And guess whose name? So the city of New York gave out 25,000 permits from the president of the police bureau to carry a gun, and guess whose name is in the 1911 Sullivan Act? Take a guess whose name. Whose name do you think it is? He was president last year, and it would be his great-grandpa, Donald Trump. Donald Trump's grandfather is listed as a person who's allowed to carry a gun in New York City from the 1911 Sullivan Act. Did you know that? Did you know that? If you didn't know, now you know. This is the first act, and this is the remaining act, and this is still the law. And I can feel myself getting angry. This is still the law today, that if you want to carry a concealed gun, you have to get permission from the president of the police bureau. And now it's called the captain of the police. And in LA, I have to sign up to be a reserve deputy, and I would never sign up to work with those guys. Google LASD death squads, and that's how excited I would be to join the LA Sheriff's Department. I would not do it. Couldn't pay me any money to do it. So our gun rights are stripped away based on racism. For my conservative friends who hate hearing this, and it's like putting a knitting needle in their ear, your gun rights were stripped based on racism. I don't want this to be true. So then we have Carol circumstances clause, and I talked about this the other night in pretty great detail. I went back and forth into Carol maybe a dozen different times last night, and I was talking, sorry about that. I went into Carol versus the United States last night, maybe 2 nights ago. In very great detail, so I don't want to bore anybody who was in the live the other night. But Carroll versus the United States, is this based? What is Carroll versus the United States based on? Well, Carroll versus the United States is a case out of Oklahoma where the Carrolls are being sought down to try to bust them for selling alcohol, and so what happens is they create the exigent circumstances clause. And what happens in the exigent circumstances clause is it says that the police can circumvent your rights if they are trying to seize evidence, if they think there's going to be a loss of life, or if the cops are in hot pursuit of you. And I have that in a box right down here, as you guys can see. Okay? The 1925 exigent circumstances clause, loss of life, hot pursuit, or seize of you, and then that creates the 1925 automobile exclusionary rule. Okay? And so now, is Carroll versus the United States, is that based on race? No. No, it's not. Carroll versus the United States is not based on race. It is based on authoritarianism and a mandate. That's what it's based on. Did you know that? Did anybody know that? Did you guys know that? Did you know that Carroll versus the United States is based on a mandate? Officer safety is going to come with Terry versus Ohio in 1968. That's going to come from Terry versus Ohio. But did anybody know that Carroll versus the United States is based on a mandate? Did anybody not know that? Did anybody not know that? Okay. Listen, right now, conservatives are fighting for your rights. Right now, the only thing between absolute mandate and tyranny is conservatives. So just so you know that, the only thing standing between that ridiculously lost old man named Biden and a mandate demanding that you inject a medication into your body are conservatives. So be very careful, guys, as we fight back and forth between liberal and conservative. Right now, the conservatives are upholding this nation. And if you didn't know it, why am I going right? Because I'm for liberty, I'm for freedom, I'm for the Bill of Rights. That's why I'm going right. That's why I hope Ron DeSantis runs for president. Because right now, the conservatives are saving us, like it or not. Just like the conservatives have to face that a lot of the laws are based on racism, the liberals need to face that our country right now is being saved by conservatives. If you didn't know that, now you know. Welcome to knowledge. Welcome to understanding. Good to see you here. So now right here, all mandates are unconstitutional. All mandates are unconstitutional. Okay. So now Carroll versus the United States is going to be based on authoritarianism and based on a mandate. And that, by the way, is Carroll versus the United States still a law today? Is Carroll versus the United States still a law today? Anybody? Is Carroll versus the United States still today enacted? Yes or no? Anybody? Is Carroll versus the United States still, do they still have the automobile exclusionary rule from 1925? Anybody? 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 Can anybody tell me, is Carroll versus the United States still law today? Is Carroll versus the United States? Yes, it is. It is. Yes, Carroll versus the United States is still law today. It's still law today. It's still going on today. You know, and you know, this is the hard part for me, right? This is hard. This is hard because I'm not going to be disingenuous so that you like me. I'm not going to be disingenuous. If white people or light-colored people have a hard time hearing that the tyrannical laws that we live under today, most of them are based on race, then I guess you don't like me. But I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to make things up that are not true. I'm going to tell the truth whether you like it or not. And if you can't handle it, then you can't handle it. Because everything is not racist. The laws that our country have been crafted and created under are mostly racist. Now, Carroll versus the United States is based on a mandate and it's based on authoritarianism. However, that's just one of a few. 1911 Sullivan Act that strips away our Second Amendment is based on racism. Now, the 1919 case of Cynic versus the United States is again based on authoritarianism. It is not based on race. 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 The 1919 case of Cynic versus the United States is not based on race. It's based on authoritarianism. And why is it the 1919 holding? Because as you know, 1914 to 1918, what that's going to be is the First World War. And so the 1919 case of Cynic versus the United States is where Charles Cynic is trying to make sure people don't go to war to kill themselves in 1917. His case is heard in 1919. And that's based on the idea that the federal government should be able to institute a draft and send your son or daughter to war. And there was almost 100% chance. That's a little high. I don't know. I remember the Vietnam statistics. The average lifespan for a grunt was like 85 seconds or something like that. Someone who went to Vietnam, you had 2 minutes when you landed on the ground before you would be shot or killed. So now we know our First Amendment right of Cynic versus the United States is based on authoritarianism and based on government control, and that's your First Amendment right that's going to be stripped. And then the 1911 Sullivan Act is going to be your Second Amendment right being stripped, and that's based on racism. And then the 1925 Carroll Act, which is going to strip away all of your liberty to travel freely. Your Fourth Amendment right is going to be ripped away based on authoritarianism, based on power to the federal government. And then as we move forward here, the 1934 National Firearms Act And then the 1952 Boggs Act. Has anybody ever heard of the 1952 Boggs Act? Has anybody heard of the 1952 Boggs Act? Anybody? Anybody? What is the 1952 Boggs Act based on? Is it based on authoritarianism? Is it based on racism? Or is it based on capitalism and big pharma? So the 1952 Boggs Act, this is going to be the most draconian act that is created by Congress that is going to say that if you have one seed of marijuana, that you can be arrested and taken to the dungeon. One seed of marijuana will put you in prison for 10 years. And this is not based on racism. This is based on Harry Anslinger creating laws from the Federal Narcotics Agency, which will later become the DEA. And this is based on Harry Anslinger making sure that cannabis cannot get a foothold and the cannabis industry, the hemp industry, cannot get going. And so a lot of people believe that Harry Anslinger did what he did based on racism. And let me just help you real fast. That's not true. He may have used racism as the guise, but what Harry Anslinger did was based 100% on his pocketbook. That he had inherited Andrew Mellon's fortune because he married Andrew Mellon's daughter. And so when he creates the Boggs Act, it makes it so that you can be arrested for a seed of marijuana. What he's actually doing is making sure that the hemp industry can't get a foothold in America because he's protecting the investments of DuPont and William Randolph Hearst and John D. Rockefeller. Remember, John D. Rockefeller is going to live to be 97 years old. So as we continue forward, so now the 1952 Boggs Act is based on what? Authoritarianism and on big capital, on big pharma controlling us and controlling the narrative of what's going to be legalized because they don't want marijuana to compete with pharmaceutical drugs because, as you know, a lot of people, they can smoke marijuana and they don't have to take a pain pill anymore. So the Boggs Act is not based on race. Everything Harry Anslinger did may have been done under the guise that it was racism, but it wasn't. Everything Harry Anslinger did was based on capitalism. It was based on capitalism. It was based on authoritarianism, right? And so when you look at the 1952 Boggs Act and you actually start to unwrap it, has anybody ever read the 1952 Boggs Act besides me? Anybody else actually read the 1952 Boggs Act? Has anybody read it? Anybody know what I'm talking about when I say the 1952 Boggs Act? You can get it online. Yeah, the wrestler's name was Dave Schultz, and he happened to be my idol. So I know exactly what happened. DuPont did indeed kill Dave Schultz. Dave Schultz may be the greatest wrestler in U.S. history and in global history. Dave Schultz was an entire league above everybody else. And so that's what we're talking about. DuPont did kill Dave Schultz, and it makes me sick to my stomach. I cried when Dave Schultz was killed, just in case you guys didn't know. It was heartbreaking for me because I was a little kid, and Dave Schultz was Foxcatcher. That's right, he was a team Foxcatcher, and that was funded by DuPont. DuPont would later die in prison. Yeah, I quit smoking weed just because I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to deal with the cops. Because I travel around the country teaching constitutional law, and I don't want my car to smell like marijuana. So that's the reason why I quit smoking marijuana, because I don't want to be arrested. I don't know if I consciously quit or if I just quit because I want to be able to teach history with a clear head and not have to, how you doing, nice to see you, not have to mess up anything that I'm teaching as we go along. So now the 1952 Boggs Act is going to be based on capitalism and authoritarianism. And even though Harry Anslinger was known as a great racist, that's not why he did what he did. He did what he did for capitalism to protect his investment in the fossil fuel industry and in big pharmaceutical industry. I still wrestle to this day. I still wrestle. Matter of fact, I just bashed my eye open 2 weeks ago wrestling my nephew, and I cut my head open right before I went to Turning Point, and I was really disappointed. So now right here, we're going to move forward. And now we've talked about Terry versus Ohio, but before we talk about Terry versus Ohio in 1968, let's talk about the 1968 Omnibus Crime Bill. Has anybody heard of the 1968 Omnibus Crime Bill? Anybody heard of the 1968 Omnibus crime bill. Has anybody heard of that before? Is this the first time you've heard the term the 1968? Can someone type that down there for me? The 1968 Omnibus, Omnibus crime bill. Have you heard about that before? Has anybody heard about that before? I think I can. I'm trying to get my phone to do what I want. But so anybody heard of that before? Nope. Angel's not heard of it. Anybody heard of the 1968 Omnibus crime bill? Has anybody heard of that? Right. Thank you. I appreciate that, Moon. Thank you for typing that in. The 1968 Omnibus crime bill. Okay, Dr. Vegetable. So now what we're talking about when we talk about the 1968 Omnibus crime bill, and I just, I'm kind of stuck on it because I want my friends to understand something here. My politics and the way I see the world has not changed at all. What has changed is the left is being loony. Mandates are terrible. Terrible. Throughout the history of time, a mandate's been terrible. So in the 1968 Omnibus crime bill, what that's going to have in it is, what's it called? Gun control. And so in 1968, you got World War II going from 1939 to 1945. And so when you get to the Omnibus crime bill, when a lot of those soldiers come back from war in 1945, so just do the math on it. If you go, and I have it right down here, if you go to war from 1939 to 1945, when you get back from war, let's say you go to war at 20, let's say you're a 22, whatever, and you get out of war in 1945, so how old are you then? You're 25, you're 27, you're 28. So when you get back from World War II, what you're in a war for several years. This is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun. So you're used to carrying a gun around with you. And you have hundreds of thousands of troops coming back from World War II. The World War II time period has such a gigantic effect on American culture that the troops coming back from World War II, they come back from communism by Russia, and Russia has entered into this horrific war. And World War II is listed from 1939 to 1945. But is that really when World War II was? Or was World War II from 1929, 1931 until 1945? And those are the more statistics, the more accurate data. When did we officially enter into World War II? In 1939 to 1945. So when you had troops coming back from World War II, you had young men coming back who were still in their 20s. So if the war ends in 1945 and you're 25 or 30 years old, by the time it's 1968, you just add on 15 years, 23 years. So you go from 25 and now you're 48 years old. You're 52 years old. And so you have to think about things not just in simple ratio of, oh, this is the law, is this racist, is this not racist? You have to get into the law. Is this authoritarian? Is this classist? And so when you get to the 1968 Omnibus crime bill, and within the 68 Omnibus crime bill, you're going to have the gun control legislation in the 1968 Omnibus crime bill. And you have a lot of those troops who came back from World War II who are now in their mid-40s and mid-50s. And what are they used to doing? They're going to the grocery store. They put a gun in the car to go to the grocery store. When you spend a couple years in war, you're used to carrying a gun around. And this was a very normal thing. This was a very normal thing for people to carry a gun around. So in the 1968 Omnibus crime bill, what's going to happen is you're going to criminalize guns. I'm sorry I have all the tape over this. I'm just showing the jurisprudence of Terry versus Ohio. This is not on your poster online. This is just on my step repeater so that I can show you guys how the laws spur out from Terry. But the 1968 Omnibus crime bill, this is the gun control portion of it is not based on racism. It's based on authoritarianism and on government control. Because remember, you have the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement is going to officially end in about 1965. And so when you get here, they don't want anybody to carry a gun unless you're a government official. You see? You see? And so now the Omnibus crime bill that's going to have the Gun Control Act, this is going to be based on authoritarianism and on government control. The Black Panthers have been destroyed. They've been completely wiped away. And so the omnibus crime bill, what they're going to do is they don't want any of those soldiers from World War II to carry guns around anymore. It's based on authoritarianism. It's not always based on racism. And so now we start to understand that our government is starting to lock down the controls on you and me so that we don't have our basic fundamental freedom to carry a gun. And now today in our world, you have these kids that have been so terrified that they want to create absolute gun bans. And that's the problem with our country. That's the problem with our country. Is that we're being led, our country's being led by a media that's continually pushing fear. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. And where is the most crime in America? Where there's the most gun control. And if you guys didn't know it, I'm a Second Amendment advocate all the way. Every single gun law should be wiped away. There shouldn't be a gun registry. And if you guys didn't know it or not, if you didn't know it right now, go ahead and go try to buy some bullets. Go try to buy some bullets. Head down to your local armory, head down to your local gun store and go try to buy the bullets for your gun right now. You can't find them. The federal government is making sure that we don't have bullets. Why are they doing that? Do you ever ask yourself that? Why are they doing that? Why can't you buy bullets today? Okay. Now, you guys can have the debate back and forth about why different killings happened, but it has a lot to do with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan. So some of my conservative friends who celebrate Ronald Reagan, I'm not a guy who celebrates Reagan. Reagan ruined our country the most. Maybe Richard Nixon. Between Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, Nixon's a little worse. Maybe not. I don't know. But Reagan is the guy who created the Brady Bill that stripped us of our handgun rights. And how are most crimes committed today? How is most gun violence happening? What's the number one way that gun violence happens in America today? What kind of gun is used in gun violence today? The number one gun that's used? Anybody? 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 Remember Reagan giving his speech, just like loopy Joe Biden? Reagan is giving his speech and the head of Goldman Sachs whispers to him what to say. I call that the Reagan moment. Does anybody know about that? Does anybody know about that? A handgun, Dr. Vegetable. That's exactly correct. And what do we call them? Assault rifles. There's no such thing as an assault rifle. That's crap. That's crud. See there, I almost said it again. The number one way that a crime is committed today with a gun is with a handgun. With a handgun. It's not with a rifle. And so they terrorize the kids today. I have a family member, I don't want to point out anybody in my family, but there's a family member of mine who believes that you shouldn't have any gun rights, and she's 24 years old. And she's lost. She doesn't understand that without gun rights, we fall into a tyrannical state. We would be just like Australia right now if we didn't have the Second Amendment, just so you guys know. Just so you guys know. By far, handguns are the number one way that someone is murdered in the United States of America. And the number one way someone dies from a handgun is what? Anybody? Anybody? The number one way that someone dies from a handgun is what? Anybody? 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 I'll wait. I'll wait. The number one way that someone is killed from a handgun is what? I'm going to wait till someone gets the answer. I want to see it. Does anybody know the number one way that someone is killed from a handgun? Anybody? The police is not correct. The number one way someone dies from a handgun is, what is it? Yes, exactly correct. Suicide. Suicide. The number one way someone dies from a handgun today is by suicide. So all of you gun control advocates, you're on the opposite side of the fence of me. You and I we don't align on this. The number one way someone is killed from a handgun today is suicide. Just so you know. So now, as we move forward, now Terry versus Ohio is based on racism, whether you like it or not. I hate to tell you that, but that's just the simple fact of the matter. John Terry's a black guy downtown Cleveland. I give long lectures on Terry, so I'm not going to bore you guys here. And so then, as we move forward here, Pennsylvania versus Mims, you have to get out of the car in the name of officer safety. Harry Mims is a black guy, and so the reason why you get out of the car for officer safety, is that based on classism, or is that based on racism? Pro-guns all the way. Hey, I mean, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be fake for anybody. If people don't watch my live or they don't want to tune in, and they don't want to, then I don't. I care about your feelings. The facts don't though. So So Pennsylvania versus Mims, you have to get out of the car for officer safety, is based on racism. Exactly correct. Exactly correct. And so then as we move forward here, Sitz versus Michigan State Police, this is what creates DUI checkpoints in America. This is based on what? Authoritarianism. Authoritarianism, on government control. And Sitz versus Michigan State Police, yeah, I get out too, Tom Knock, if you didn't notice from my last video. I don't have to, you are not arrested because you are detained. Detained does not equal arrested. And that's the reason why the other day I got out of the car when I was pulled over. Did anybody here not see that audit I did the other day? And I didn't mean to do an audit, but I got out of the car the other day, and that's based on Terry versus Ohio that says you're detained if you get pulled over, but detained is not supposed to mean arrested. That's why I told the guy, sorry, brother, you can't arrest me. You cannot arrest me. Detainment does not mean arrested according to the official version, but now for police, detainment means that you're arrested. And I tried to educate that cop and tell him that I am not arrested. You do not control my motion. You're a guy doing a job. I'm detained in this position. That does not mean that I've been under arrest. And I checked his booty because he does not have the right to arrest my movement. I clearly rolled down my windows and showed them that I did not have any weapons. After that, I am not arrested. I am detained. My car is there. My keys are in the car. I'm not going anywhere. That does not mean your motion has been arrested. That means you've been detained. It's a slight temporary detainment, not an arrest. There's a big difference. And when you get pulled over and you deal with cops and your freedom of movement is not arrested, you've only been detained. And you guys saw what I did. I pulled my shirt up and I showed him I am not armed. I literally pulled my shirt up. I was a little bit insecure to put that on the internet, but I was like, you know what? Forget it. It is what it is. So you're not arrested just because you're detained. And you tell the cop, you have not arrested my freedom of movement. You have to be willing to show him that you are not armed, or he can Terry stop you and put you into handcuffs. That's why I showed him that I was not armed, so he couldn't put me in handcuffs. And if you show him you're not armed and then he still puts you in handcuffs, he has arrested your motion. He's arrested your motion, meaning that he's violated your freedom, and you can sue him outside of his qualified immunity. And in Arizona, there is no qualified immunity anyway. They've abolished qualified immunity in Arizona, in case you guys didn't know that. And I learned that. So now Pennsylvania versus Mims is going to be based on racism. And then when we get to Sitz versus Michigan State Police, this is DUI checkpoints. Does anybody know about the Sitz versus Michigan State Police holding of 1990? Right? The 1990 holding of Sitz versus Michigan State Police, this is what allows the police to set up DUI checkpoints based on the idea that they're reasonably suspicious that someone's driving down the road drunk, And this is not based on racism. This is based on authoritarianism. I put on the title of this, is it classist or is it racist? It's based on authoritarianism, on total police state. That's what this is based on. Sitz versus Michigan State Police is based on authoritarianism. It's based on a total police state. And just talking about it makes me so upset. It makes me so angry that right now there's cops setting up a checkpoint to stop you, to check you. And then what police policy is, they've created policy around Sitz versus Michigan State Police that says that if you don't submit to the breath test, well, then you can be arrested and taken to jail on suspicion. Suspicion. And then they'll mandatorily draw blood from you through a mandate. Every time you hear the word mandate, it should make you cringe inside. Okay? So now right here, Michigan State Police, this is based on, now let's take a look at the 1989 holding of Graham versus Connor. I got into this a little bit the other day, and this is based on, which by the way, if you guys haven't seen the Terry era, I actually reenact Graham versus Connor in the Terry era. And in the Terry era, what it says, let me get rid of that. Let me see if I can get rid of that. Sorry about that. Cancel. Okay, so Graham versus Connor is where DeThorne Graham, the case is in 1989, but DeThorne Graham is pulled over in 1984. And when he's pulled, oh man, okay, 10 more minutes, Oliver. 10 minutes and I'll get out. 10 minutes. Thanks for telling me that. I appreciate it. I just get talking so fast. So Graham versus Connor is based on the 1984 case of DeThorne Graham being pulled over. And just so you guys know, DeThorne Graham is what? He's Terry stopped. What was DeThorne Graham's crime? Going in a convenience store. I think it was called a Quick Go or Quick and Go. He went into a convenience store and came back out without purchasing anything. And that gave the cop the right to Officer Connor, that gave the cop the right to Terry stop him based on the cop being suspicious of him. We would not have use of force policy based on, and the use of force policy nationally is that the reasonable officer on the scene will determine the amount of reasonable force to be used on you. We wouldn't even have that holding if there wasn't Terry versus Ohio, because DeThorne Graham wouldn't have been pulled over for no reason, for simply going into a convenience store and coming back out. And so the 1989 holding of Graham versus Connor, so remember that's in 1984. And so now here's the question I have for you. Is Graham versus Connor, is that based on racism or is that based on total police authoritarianism? And just in case you guys didn't know, the Supreme Tyranny, the Supreme Court, they have always been cop suckers. Cop suckers. Matter of fact, current Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito is a total cop sucker. You have no idea. No idea. Hunter, good to see you. I was talking about you earlier before. I don't know if you came in the cast earlier. So now, Graham versus Connor, you could say that it's based on racism, but you could also easily say it's based on authoritarianism, on the idea that the Supreme Court justices, they want to give all of the power to the police over you. Because let me ask you guys a real quick question. Do you think, well, I guess there's a couple ways to look at it. Do you think use of force is determined by the reasonable officer on the scene? Do you think Supreme Court justices ever have to deal with that? Do you think they ever have to deal with that? Never. Never. But the other day when I was telling that cop exactly what I thought of him, right? I was always mindful to be looking in the camera in case this coward is going to grab me from behind. Because after I showed him I didn't have any weapons, you better not grab me, bud. You don't have the right to put your hands on me. So now you could argue back and forth about Graham versus Connor being based on race or based on authoritarianism. I'm going to say it's a combination of the two. Because remember, from 1980, when Ronald Reagan creates for-profit prisons, 1982 actually, when he creates for-profit prisons, until 1989, the prison population of white to black shifts dramatically. It shifts dramatically, okay? And so you're going to have this influx of black inmates, and you're also going to get the 1980 holding of Johnson versus Glick. So we can talk about that as well. And now that the prison is full, so now just in case you guys don't know, the 1980 holding of Johnson versus Glick, what this holding says is that if you are put in jail or prison and the guards hurt you, then you cannot file a 1983, which is called a civil rights violation, if the guards are only keeping order. Keeping order. So if you guys ever get arrested and you end up in the dungeon, please make sure that you become a beta male, shut up, pay attention, and don't deal with anybody. Don't talk to anybody. Become a mute. Just don't interact with anybody if you go put in the dungeon. Trust me. Trust me. Do not try to assert your rights in jail, because the 1980 holding of Johnson versus Glick, it's going to exactly the angry snowman. What exactly is keeping order and what exactly is absolute tyranny or abuse or a 1983, which is a civil rights violation, okay? Try me, the gods had sent someone. Okay, so Graham versus Connor creates the use of force policy for all police in the nation, and that's based on Terry versus Ohio. Okay, so then as we move forward here, you're going to get Sitz versus Michigan State Police, but then you're going to get this case here, which is the 1996 holding of Wren versus the United States. Wren versus the United States is what creates pretextual stops. Pretextually meaning that the cops can pretextually stop you if they believe that you're violent, or they believe you're a gang member, or they believe that you're drunk driving. They can just stop your car whenever they want. And I actually found that video. I wish I had it where I could show you guys a clip of it, or I could edit it in, but I can't. So So now, Wren versus the United States, Michael Wren was a black guy, and so was the case, and the case goes down in 1996, but I believe he was pulled over in 1995 or 94, or was it 93? Someone can correct me on that. I would love to hear that. But now, when Michael Wren is pulled over and pretextual stops are created, are pretextual stops, and here's the question for my conservative friends, are pretextual stops used against black people, brown people, or white people? Are pretextual stops used against black people, brown people, or white people? Anybody? Is it classist, Hunter? Is a pretext? So Hunter, as you drive down the road, are you pulled over on a pretextual stop? Do you get pulled over on a pretextual stop? Do you think I get pulled over on a pretextual stop? I do not. I do not. I do not get pulled over on a pretextual stop. That's why I asked the cop originally, why'd you pull me over? Because if he didn't have the correct answer, I wouldn't give him my ID. I'm not going to be pretextually stopped because I'm willing to go to jail and fight that to try to get it back to the federal court to try to fight Wren versus the United States. Hunter, you didn't answer the question. You think it's more common in low-income areas. But the truth is, where is it more common? Where is it more common? Where does a pretextual stop happen the most? Where does it happen the most? Anybody? Hunter? Anybody? Where does a pretextual stop happen the most? In minority communities. In black communities, in brown communities. That's where a pretextual stop happens the most. If you didn't know that, welcome to knowledge. Now you know. And I can show you a ton of statistics. There is an absolute ton of statistics on this. Pretextual stops are done in high crime areas. Well, where is the high crime area? Wherever they put the most cops. If they put the most cops in Beverly Hills, you'll find out that Beverly Hills is the most high crime area. If they put the most cops in Compton, you'll find out that Compton is the most high crime area. Statistics of crime, and people will always say FBI statistics. Well, let me just tell you something. That's all manufactured garbage. It's all manufactured trash. So I'm going to quit at 90 minutes. So in 4 more minutes, I'm going to jump off here. So I'll take any questions if you guys have any questions. So now 1990. Now the 2001 case of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista. Is anybody familiar with the 2001 case of Atwater versus City of Lago? Which, by the way, Florida versus Harris. Harris is a black man. It's based on race. Wilson versus Arkansas. Wilson is a black man. It's based on race. This allows them to no-knock raid your home. Tennessee versus Garner is a black kid. It's based on race. Cops can shoot you when you run away if it's in the name of officer safety. Cops can no-knock raid your home if it's in the name of officer safety. Race, race. Wren versus United States is based on race. Florida versus Harris, if a dog barks at your car, they can then impound your car and arrest you for probable cause, meaning the dog barked. Harris was black. A dog barking at your car is based on race. Like it or not. So now, the 2001 case of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista. Okay. I got the tail of that comment, but what did you just say? Wrong. Just look at murder and violent crime statistics. Facts are race. Facts are racist. Plasma. I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, sir. It's just, I only have a couple minutes left. That's just a lot to unpack. Let me just give you a real simple statistic. Black people kill black people the most. White people kill white people the most. Brown people kill brown people the most. Asian people kill Asian people the most. Now, do black people commit the most murder per capita? Yes. That's a fact. Why? Because they're cut out of socioeconomic prosperity. And so I'm just keeping it real. No money, no food, no shelter, no warmth, no protection, and you're going to kill people. And so, you also have, and just so you know, and I've said this out loud a few times, and if you're black and you get offended, I'm really sorry. But the black community is the least educated. Oh, it makes you mad? I'm sorry to hear that. It's a fact. The black community has the least amount of education. And why is that? Because historically, they were cut out of education. Black people were cut out of education. And if you guys didn't know, I happen to be attracted to black women. So I'm not trying to shoot myself in the foot here. I'm attracted to all women, but I'm also attracted to black women. So I'm not trying to be rude to black people. I've dated black women in my life, and I like them. So if you don't like it, too damn bad. I do. I guess it's the internal racism in me. That's why I like black women, I guess. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is this: is that when you talk about how black people commit the most crime, then you say, why does that happen? Why is that happening? Because you have the least educated with the least money. Does that make sense to you? That the least educated community with the least education would commit the most crime because we live under the social contract. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I hope I didn't offend everybody here. But if you're offended, I'm just giving you guys facts here. These are the absolute facts. Okay? So now let's take a look at the 2001 case of City of Lago Vista, right? And so when you have Atwater versus City of Lago Vista, Gail Atwater was a white woman. Does anybody know what the 2001 holding of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista is about? Does anybody know what? Hey, listen, Nostalgic, if you want to have a debate, bro, it's my favorite thing to do. And we'll do it on Zoom, and we'll have an egg timer, and we'll just share the time back and forth. I would absolutely love to debate you, brother. I've offered dozens of people to debate, and very few actually show up. So everybody here, you guys can have this right here. Nostalgic said he wants to debate me. Accepted. Accepted, my brother. Accepted. Or my sister, whichever you are, or they, them, whatever your particular gender pronoun is. I have trans people in my family. That's why I hold space for them. I do not agree that trans sports should mix with male and female sports. I think you should have trans women's sports and trans male sports, women's sports and men's sports. That's what I think. So I am not discriminatory versus trans people. I support people who are trans. I just want to be sure because I called that person he, them, they, whatever. I don't want to get lost in this cultural garbage. So now, does anybody know what the 2001 case of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista actually does? And then this is the last thing. This is the last thing, and then I'm going to move on because I've been on here for 9 minutes. I'm sorry to take up. I didn't mean to assume your pronouns, dude. Don't do that. Whatever you want to go by. Don't lock me into some ridiculously stupid cultural thing because I'm not interested. Okay, I'm not interested, and I will straight up. I can't say anything bad. I'll have to tell you to go have a ham sandwich because a lot of parents are contacting me. As a matter of fact, a school in Florida just contacted me and asked me to teach a curriculum there. And so I am not going to curse and I am not going to say anything mean to you. I'm going to tell you to go have a ham sandwich. Okay. So now can we please stick on the case here? 2001 case of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista. Does anybody know what the case is about? Does anybody know what this is about? Can anybody cite the case? Can anybody post a link to it? City of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista. Okay? Okay, Nostalgic. Thank you. I appreciate that. I am not politically incorrect. I try not to be politically incorrect. I now say black people instead of blacks, even though they say whites, Asians, and Mexicans. Even though the black people say whites, Asians, and Mexicans. We don't say the Mexicans, the whites. We don't say the Asians, but black people insisted I say black people. Even in my scolding of black people, I still say black people because I don't want to offend black people. So the City of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista makes it so that you can be arrested for any infraction of the law. And that's in my ebook, by the way, and T. Roy is giving out coupons. So if you guys want to get my ebook, T. Roy, he's a moderator here. I'm getting hungry too. I got to get the hell out of here. I haven't had any food today. I'm doing my intermittent fasting. I saw my face on the live the other day. I'm so chunky monkey. I'm so chunky monkey right now. I've got to lose this weight. So I'm going to lose this fat weight. But the 2001 holding of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista is Gail Atwater is pulled over in City of Lago Vista, Texas. Gail Atwater is white. She's white, and her case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court holding is a 5-4 decision, 4 conservatives, 1 liberal, and the liberal writes the holding that says that if a cop sees you break the law, even a minor infraction of the law, you can be arrested. And that's from 2001. And if you didn't know about the 2001 holding of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista, then you don't know that you can be arrested for jaywalking. Then you don't know you can be arrested for speeding. You can be arrested for spitting on the sidewalk. You can be arrested in America for any infraction of the law. And there are thousands and thousands of laws on the books, meaning you can be arrested for absolutely almost anything. And that's the most important holding in our history today besides Terry versus Ohio. And so what does that mean? Is Gail Atwater, was she black? No, she was white. She was white. By the way, if anybody can reach her, I'm dying to interview her. If anybody can reach Gail Atwater from Atwater versus City of Lago Vista, can you please let me know? Anybody from Texas? I would absolutely love to interview Gail Atwater from Atwater versus City of Lago Vista. You can be arrested for anything. Tiffany, I'm trying not to ignore you, babe. I'm trying not to ignore you, but you can distract me. You can distract me, and I don't want you to distract me. So you can distract me, and I don't want you to distract me. So the 2001 case of Atwater versus City of Lago Vista says that you can be arrested for any infraction of the law. Is that based on racism? No, it's not. You can be arrested for anything. Is that based on race? No, it's not. It's based on authoritarianism and government control over us. And who did that? The Supreme Court. And I said this yesterday, when the OSHA case goes to the Supreme Court about the mandatory medication, be prepared for the Supreme Court to hold against us. And be prepared for new cities to sprout up all over America that are constitutional cities where we ban government agents. It's coming. It's coming. You heard it from me first. Okay, I've been on for 95 minutes. Any questions? Do we have any questions? And then I'm going to get the heck out of here. Do we have any questions? Mwah. Love you, Tiffany. Love talking to you. Authoritarianism, authoritarianism, authoritarianism. That's exactly correct. Do you think resisting is for a catch-all arrestable offense created by? Yes. Of course, you know what I think on that, Angry Snowman. You know exactly what I think. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. And by the way, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a YouTuber last night on the phone, and I really appreciate the sweet things everybody says. And even some of the hatred I get, and I especially love it. My shirt says overturn Terry. Yes, ask me, because I'm an expert in Terry versus Ohio. I do have 3 smalls in stock. If you guys want a small shirt, I have 3 smalls in stock. I do have some shirts in my van that I'm gonna get printed up that say overturn Terry. I'm gonna sell some shirts here pretty quick because I have to raise some revenue just to keep, hey Paul, good to see you. Appreciate you coming by. So Atwater versus City of Lago Vista is based on authoritarianism and based on government control. And so we have to understand, and as I step back here, and I just want to take a larger view of the poster here, right? So in the beginning of our history, we had everything that was based on race. And then through the Lochner era from 1897 to 1937, everything's going to be based on giving all the power to big business, and you're still going to have a lot of racist holdings like Corrigan versus Buckley, Lum versus Rice, during the Lochner era. And then Terry v. Ohio, you're going to have, again, the 1954 ruling of Brown versus Board of Education is going to desegregate America. And that's based on Earl Warren being an authoritarian and making sure that he would have access to know what was going on inside of black schools, black restaurants, and black clubs. And that's why he desegregated America. And then the 1968 holding of Terry is based on race. And then all the laws that spurn off of Terry split on both authoritarianism and racism. However, the most ironic part is that the laws that spurn off of Terry are based on a black guy taking his case to the Supreme Court. So my conservative friends out there, this is a fact that we have to face, you and I. And for the black people watching, and for people who think everything's based on race, we have a list of people over here who have been legally departed. But just so you know, 3 times more white people, oh Lord, I spilled my water that I never took a drink of. There's 3 times more white people are killed by cops than black people. Per capita, it's more black people. And then, just so you know, the #1 murdered race by police are Latinos, my people. We're the #1 killed by police is Latinos. Latinos are killed by police more than any other race. We dwarf the black population per capita with how many Latinos are killed because of their race. Because of race, or they're killed because they don't have paperwork and their family can't kick up a storm. And so then what happens is tons of Latinos are killed because we don't want to fight it because our families don't want to get deported. You see, I spilled some water here and there's electricity everywhere, so I don't want to. Okay, so cool. Do I have any questions? I'm coming up on 100 minutes. This is one of the longest live casts I've done, but I just want to try to I want to infect as many people as I possibly can with information. You guys are more than welcome to correct me on anything I've said. If I made any mistakes, please don't hesitate to drop a comment and let me know where I made a mistake, because I don't want to be wrong. I want to be right, and I want to be corrected if I am incorrect. So please don't hesitate to correct me if I'm incorrect. I don't want to be wrong. I really don't. I think it's terrible to be wrong. So now let's just get the overall. There's only 60 people left. So now let me overall. How many people believe that our country is based on authoritarianism or based on racism? How many people believe it's authoritarianism or racism? Anybody? How many people believe that our laws are based on authoritarianism? Now, they may have been crafted against black people, but my personal belief is that the laws that we have today were created for black people. The majority of the laws that cuff us up today, that put us in handcuffs, especially Terry versus Ohio, God bless you too, especially Terry versus Ohio, definitely based on race. I know it for a fact. Hunter, I know it for a fact, brother. And Hunter and I are going to schedule a phone call for tomorrow. Hunter, if you're still in the room, please let's schedule a phone call for tomorrow so we can talk on FaceTime and we can talk more in depth about it. But so now my personal belief, and by the way, this is up to you guys to make your own decisions. I believe that the laws that were crafted against black people and against Mexican people and against Asian people, I believe now that the laws in our country are used in an authoritarian way to silence the voices and arrest anybody. And as you guys know from the First Amendment auditor community, the majority of First Amendment auditors are white. And the majority of First Amendment auditors who are arrested simply for using their First Amendment right are white. And the majority of people who are arrested doing First Amendment audits who are white are taken to the jail based on laws created against racism, against race, and then they're put in the dungeon based on authoritarianism. So it's a real easy timeline to see, right? It's a real easy timeline to see. I'm at 100 minutes. This is way too long. I got to get out of here. First Amendment auditors are the heroes of our country. When you see someone First Amendment auditing, give that person a thumbs up. When you see someone filming the police, give them an attaboy, attaboy, attagirl. Thank you so much for doing that. You should be thanking First Amendment auditors every time you see them. And you yourself should always be filming police. You guys see the error that I made? Do you guys see the error that I made in my audit that I did a few days ago? The error that I made, they should be funded. Exactly correct, sir. First Amendment auditors are heroes. And God bless every one of you and thank every one of you guys for what you do. Thank you so much. I appreciate your service. Cops do not provide a service. They're a paid job. They are not a service. Don't say thank you to your service to police. They don't provide a service. They joined a gang. So, authoritarianism or racism? What is it? Is our country authoritarianism or racist? Authoritarianism or racism? Anybody? Authoritarianism or racism? Anybody? Anybody? Both. I agree. It's both. It's both. It's authoritarian. I think it's more authoritarianism. I think the police policies and procedures are based on race, and I think that the police arrest First Amendment auditors and everybody else based on authoritarianism. Based on authoritarianism. Okay. Okay. Cool. 102 minutes. My longest live yet. But to be honest with you, as Tiffany knows, because Tiffany's been around since the beginning, so has T. Roy. They've both been around since the beginning. I love you guys so much. Thank you guys for supporting me, even through all that crap people put me through. And thank you so much. But on TikTok, I did 3-hour lives. I did 4-hour lives. I did them all the time. Okay. Anyway, San Joaquin Valley Transparency. Is that SSV? San Joaquin Valley Transparency? Thank you. I appreciate that. You guys, just so you know, T. Roy does have coupons. T. Roy, one of the moderator in here, T. Roy has coupons right now. I gave him a coupon for $5 off any of my products. So if you guys pick anything up, I really appreciate it. I know this is a tough conversation to have. I know it's hard. But I do know what I'm talking about. And if I don't, I don't mind being corrected. So I really know what I'm talking about. I really do. And we're only scratching the surface of the true problems in our country. So yes, San Joaquin Valley Transparency. Love those guys. Love those. And they have San Joaquin Audits, and they got Nate Skates, and they got. I'm gonna memorize all 4 of those other guys' channels, and I'm gonna shout them out next time I come on live. So anyway, and then I will be tomorrow on at 2 p.m. With Ryan from another channel at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Just so you guys know, it's 2 or 3 p.m. Pacific Standard. It's 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. I'm going to be on live with a big YouTube channel, and I do appreciate you guys giving me a call and inviting me on to do a live with you. I feel super blessed that I've been able to transfer over. Direct D is awesome. I follow Direct D on Instagram. So Direct D, if you see this, follow me back, brother. I absolutely love what you do, man. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of all the auditors. I really am. Ali Alibaba to you guys. All right, I'll get the hell out of here. I'm just drifting now. All right, thanks for your time, you guys. I appreciate it. God bless you. God bless America. And fight for our country. Fight for our Bill of Rights. Fight for our constitutional rights. Fight for our freedom. Fight for our freedom. It's worth fighting for. It's worth it. We should respect this flag and eventually get it to where we all feel like we have liberty and justice for all under this flag, because we haven't. And so we got to get there. Dr. Sean Berry, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. We got to get back to where we love this flag again, where everybody loves the flag and the flag isn't seen. Someone said the other day, I saw something, they were like, oh, I'm afraid I see American flags flying everywhere. Well, bud, I guess you don't understand what America's for. I can get in a long conversation about this. Anyway. All right. Anything else, guys? The Activism News Network. That's the channel I'll be on tomorrow, you guys. Activism News Network. I'll be on that channel tomorrow. I believe it's 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm pretty sure it's 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, but double check that. It is posted. I'll post it tonight in the community. And I got to get out of here. I got to eat some food. I haven't had any dinner yet. The Angry Snowman. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you guys, man. Had a lot of fun tonight. This was a hard conversation to have with a lot of my conservative friends. It was more uncomfortable for me than probably for you, because it's hard to say that a lot of our laws are based on racism, especially when I'm dealing with some of the people in the black community right now in such a difficult way. So, all right, guys. So I'll see you guys tomorrow on Activism News Network. I'll be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If I said anything wrong, correct me. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. See you soon. Later.